Some of this is going to be a bit sketchy. I've been doing this for 2 years now, and the sequence of events is going to overlap because I was trying to contact everybody at the same time, of course, having a bit more luck with some than others. So a lot of the time sequence overlaps, but let's just go through each member of the crew. The first contact I made, as Di Ablewhite had said in that last sequence, was Mary Stanley's daughter, Liz. And when I got in touch with her, she basically confirmed that yes, her mum worked in the tax office in Harborne, in Birmingham, off the main road, off the Hagley Road on the way in, down Meadow. Is it Meadow Lane or Meadow Drive? Anyway, and that was the real breakthrough, thanks to Di's work. And Liz said that she would have a look to see if she could find any photographs, etc., of her uncle. Her mum had not long died. Probably died at a similar time to Mum's. They both died at very, very similar ages. But she would have a look to see if she could find any details, any records, any photographs, etc. The second major breakthrough was, again, using Mr. Google. You pop in JB141, which was the recorded name of the crew in the records. Just very quickly, I'll explain what records we were using there. These are the operations records books, or the ORBs, ORBs. And in the ORB, for each sortie that the squadron departs on, all of the aircraft are noted together with all the crew, what positions they were flying, what their bomb load was, and any reports back, if the crew came back, that would be of use, whether the signal flares were well seen, etc. So anyway, we had this aircraft number JB141 that was recorded. So that's why everything revolves around JB141. So Googling JB141, there was a website called Normandy Remembered, I think it's called, and it's a very generic World War II record site. And there was a record there for JB141. You'll find a lot of the websites out there will have JB141, the aircraft, UMN2, which is the squadron's registration number for it. UM was anything for 626 Squadron out of Wickenby. N2 was the registration number for that aircraft. So Googling JB141, I find this Normandy Remembered, and there's a picture, generic picture of a Lancaster, but underneath it, in the comment section, one line, it said something along the lines of, Norman West was my father. Tony West. We've got a relative's name. But I thought, father? Crikey, this chap must be quite old now, if it was his father that had died. So I started trying to find a Tony West. Di ran some of her wizardry on some of the websites she's got access to, and we eventually, I managed to identify an Anthony West. I'm pretty sure it was Anthony West, and his son Nicole, and I couldn't get an email address or a home address for Anthony, but I did find an advertisement in a public, I shan't say which public department it was, for a position in the employ of Tony's son. So I fired an email off there. We then found a Tony West on Facebook. So something fired off there as well. And I was firing stuff off to random people. You just go to Facebook and find anybody called Anthony West and just send a load of very short direct messages to people saying, look, do you know anything about this? Are you anything to do with the Norman West, who was the pilot of this Lancaster bomber? Well, anyway, Tony did eventually get back to us and confirmed that he was the son of Norman West. Now, I'll just explain before I go on towards any of the other crews. Anybody that, well, not anybody, but most of the people that I approached about this thing in today's suspicious society, if you approach somebody and say, oh, I think I know a relative of yours, many people turn round and will quite rightly say with caution, who are you and what do you want to know? But once the poem had been presented to some of these people, even if they didn't turn out to be relatives of the crew, it melted their hearts, and it was really reassuring to speak to some people and to have the encouragement from them to keep going, to try and find other crew members. So if there's anybody out there that I had contacted and I never got back to eventually to share the results of this investigation work, then I'm sorry, but I'm sure you'll understand why, with so many lines of inquiry going out there. So yeah, we found Norman's son, Tony. And since then, I've had several conversations with Tony over the telephone, very moving conversations at times as well, because you must remember that this is somebody that in effect, he never met his father. He's had a dad all his life. His mother remarried, and he was brought up in a very loving environment. He went on to be a success himself. His children have been particularly successful, which is a common thread with this crew. The saddest thing was that Norman's mum was pregnant when he lost his dad, which must have been, well, I say it must have been heartbreaking. I can't begin to imagine how it must have felt to Tony's mum. And as those of you who will know, who've looked at the website, Norman wasn't the only member of the crew with a wife who was expecting a baby, because one of the second contacts, which was Cyril Wheatstone's family, that's Corney, Cyril Wheatstone's wife was pregnant as well, and she gave birth to Keith Wheatstone. Again, this was a contact. Oh, how do we get hold of Corney's family? I think that was again through Facebook, trying to identify. I think we did identify his granddaughter, and then we were put in touch with him, and I had a FaceTime conversation on WhatsApp, and that was when Keith Wheatstone, that's Cyril's son, suddenly brought up in front of me 2 photographs of the crew, which I'd not seen yet, and it gave us the information, the photographs to try and identify more of the crew. The one member of the crew that I put to one side initially, because I thought I'm never going to find any details searching for a John Smith. John Smith? How many John Smiths are there? But that was one of the first photographs we found, because John Smith's relatives, JJ or Joey Smith, they'd already put his obituary photograph onto the International Bomber Command database website. So there was a photograph of JJ Smith. Then finding the Baron George Upfold's relatives, I knew that we knew that he was from Greetland, which is a suburb or near to Halifax, and I used to work with a great bunch of people in the Halifax office who I knew very well. So I just put a post out to them and said, look, can anybody just do a quick shout out on, what was it, Halifax past and present or something on Facebook, mentioning George Upfold. And within a couple of hours, I had a lovely contact from Kathy, who is a relative, direct relative of George's. And again, I shared the poem with her, and I never forget her writing. She says, "I'm just in bits crying here, having read the poem." So that was another one. Roughly the similar time, maybe a day later, a week later, a month later, I don't know. There were so many emails, false leads going backwards and forwards, because we did actually have one person claiming to be a relative of George Powell that we then researched. I was desperate to get hold of her, couldn't get hold of her because it was an old email address. It was an inquiry from years ago, and turned out she had completely the wrong person. But yeah, a few weeks later, months later, using the power of the internet, Di Ablewhite again gave me a lovely family tree for Dinger Bell, Arthur Dinger Bell. But it was so remote. One of the best places to find information on the internet, if you're looking for it, is to, if you can get hold of a will. Wills, if you're leaving something to someone in a will, all their details, their full name, their address, has to be on that will. And so we found the mention of Arthur Bell by some distant auntie, leaving him some money in a will. And we researched all the people in this will either side of this person, and then found quite some distance away another person who it looked like was still alive. We had no email addresses, we had no other contacts. So I, again, as with a number of these things, I just wrote a letter. In fact, I'm thinking that's how I got hold of Mary Stanley and Tony West. Maybe I wrote them a letter. I can't remember. As I said, there's so many things have gone by. So anyway, we wrote this letter, and this lady, Jenny, picked up the letter. Her father had only recently died. It was his address. And although Arthur was quite a distant relative, she automatically brought up some photographs of Arthur that she had, his signing up photographs in his nice fresh uniform, because he was a hero to the family and well known throughout the whole of the family, and the fact that he died. So we had each of the members of the family, except for George Powell. And George, it didn't matter how much we searched. John Smith, we thought was going to be difficult. We found the relatives of Joey Smith quite relatively easily. But George Powell we were scratching our heads, and then just one random look at the Manchester Evening Standard, I think it was, or Manchester Evening Echo, by Di, and she found a photograph with a name underneath saying that George Powell, missing, presumed dead, etc. And that then allowed us through Facebook to identify some of the relatives, and I got to know Sarah and Kathy. Is it Kathy? Sorry, I'm ever so sorry. So many names. And I've been in touch with them, and they've now George Powell's son was 12 at the time, and he's still alive. He's quite frail, but Sarah and Jane are both clearly in contact with him. There's a really spooky thing when I looked up, I think it was Sarah on Facebook, and her photograph of her son came into view, and I suddenly was staring at the face of George Powell. Quite staggering, the family resemblance. It was really chilling to see him looking at me, but heartwarming at the same time. So that's how we found all the crew. Obviously an awful lot more involved with that, and I'm more than happy to share information with anybody about how we did it. But it was been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, I've got to say. The first couple of contacts that that Di had made, where we'd identified and we'd put two and two together, I was crying nearly every time I opened up my my Facebook messages, with Di saying, I think we found somebody else, then contacting them and talking to the relatives. It's been an absolute joy. I've made some very firm friends. I've met people I would never have met before, and I intend meeting people to finally square off this circle at some stage in the future. But that's enough about finding the relatives. This has been quite a long segment. Let's move on to some of the other records that we've come along the way, some of which I am absolutely flabbergasted that we found. Anyway, that's enough for that for the moment. Next will be some of the records and identifying the fate of JB141.